The UK housing market is like a coral reef bleached bone white, a shadow of its former vibrancy, starved of essential nutrients. We are facing a crisis, a stark imbalance between supply and demand. House prices have skyrocketed, outpacing wages and leaving many, especially the young, priced out of the market. This isn't just about bricks and mortar, it's about people, families, and their fundamental right to a safe, affordable place to call home. The numbers paint a bleak picture. According to recent data, the average UK house price has risen by insert percentage in the last decade alone. Meanwhile, wages have stagnated, with many struggling to make ends meet, let alone save for a deposit. The dream of home ownership is slipping further out of reach for millions. This is not simply a matter of economics, but a social crisis in the making. The consequences of this crisis are far-reaching. Rising homelessness, overcrowding, and generation rent are just the tip of the iceberg. Families are forced into cramped and inadequate housing, while young people are trapped in a cycle of renting, unable to put down roots or plan for the future. The social fabric of our communities is being stretched to breaking point. It's time to face the uncomfortable truth. We are failing an entire generation. The current trajectory is unsustainable, both socially and economically. We need a radical rethink, a fundamental shift in how we approach housing policy in this country. We need action, not empty promises. Both major political parties acknowledge the housing crisis. They offer platitudes and promise action. Yet their words ring hollow, failing to translate into meaningful policies that address the root causes of this crisis. It's a frustrating cycle of rhetoric over substance, leaving many feeling disillusioned and ignored. The Conservatives, often seen as the party of home ownership, champion policies like Help to Buy. While well-intentioned, these schemes often inflate demand without addressing the underlying issue of supply. They prop up a broken system, benefiting developers and existing homeowners while doing little to help those struggling to get a foot on the property ladder. On the other side of the aisle, Labour emphasises the need for affordable housing. They promise to build more council houses and introduce rent controls. However, their plans often lack the scale and ambition needed to make a real dent in the crisis. Decades of underinvestment in social housing cannot be reversed overnight. The truth is, both parties are guilty of short-termism. They prioritise quick fixes and headline-grabbing announcements over long-term solutions. They are more concerned with winning the next election than tackling a complex issue that requires bold action and cross-party collaboration. The Conservative approach to housing often centres around market-based solutions. They believe that stimulating the private sector through tax breaks and deregulation will lead to more houses being built, thus easing the crisis. However, critics argue that this approach has consistently failed to deliver affordable housing, instead fueling a speculative bubble that benefits the wealthy. Labour, on the other hand, advocates for a more interventionist role for the state. They propose increasing public investment in social housing, introducing stricter regulations for private landlords, and exploring innovative models like cooperative housing. However, they face criticism for not going far enough, with some arguing that their plans lack the ambition and urgency needed to address the scale of the crisis. The reality is that neither a purely market-driven nor a solely state-controlled approach is likely to solve the UK's housing crisis. What is needed is a nuanced, pragmatic approach that combines the strengths of both. This requires moving beyond ideological dogma and embracing innovative solutions that put the needs of ordinary people first. Section 4. Voices from the ground, experts and citizens speak out. The UK housing crisis is a national disgrace, says Professor Sarah Harper, a leading housing expert at Oxford University. We are failing to provide decent, affordable homes for our citizens, with devastating consequences for individuals, families, and our society as a whole. Her words are echoed by countless others, from economists and social workers to those living on the front lines of this crisis. I work full-time, but I can barely afford to rent a tiny flat, says Sarah, a 28-year-old teacher living in London. The thought of ever owning my own home feels like a distant dream. Sarah's story is tragically commonplace, reflecting the experiences of millions trapped in a cycle of insecure and expensive housing. The voices of those affected by the housing crisis are often drowned out by the political noise. It's time to listen to their stories, to understand the human cost of this crisis and the urgent need for action. Section 5. The high cost of inaction, social and economic consequences. The consequences of inaction are far-reaching and profound. As the housing crisis deepens, we risk creating a more divided and unequal society. The social fabric of our communities is fraying, with young people priced out of their hometowns, families forced into overcrowded accommodation, and key workers unable to afford to live near their places of employment. The economic implications are equally dire. The lack of affordable housing stifles economic growth as businesses struggle to attract and retain talent. It places a strain on public services as more people require support for housing-related issues. The longer we wait to address this crisis, the greater the social and economic costs will be. Section 6. Time for action, demanding better from our leaders. We cannot afford to be bystanders in this crisis. We must demand better from our elected officials. Write to your MP, sign petitions and join campaigns for affordable housing. Make your voice heard and hold politicians accountable for their promises. Support organisations working on the front lines of the housing crisis. Volunteer your time, donate to charities and amplify their message. Together, we can create a movement for change that cannot be ignored. Section 7. Building a brighter future towards a more equitable housing system. The UK housing crisis is a complex challenge, but it is not insurmountable. By working together, we can build a brighter future where everyone has access to a safe, affordable, and secure home. This requires a fundamental shift in our thinking, moving away from the short-term, market-driven approach that has failed us for too long. We need to prioritise long-term solutions, invest in social and affordable housing, and empower communities to have a greater say in how their neighbourhoods are developed. Let us create a housing system that works for everyone, not just the privileged few. Let us build a future where home ownership is a realistic aspiration, not a distant dream.